Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's top 5 most intriguing uses of data in Star Trek Next Generation. This video is a Patreon requested video requested by patron Chase Gullett. Thank you so much for your support, Chase, and for suggesting this video. So what I took this to mean and how I structured my top 5 most intriguing uses of data is this would be very different from, say, if I did a top 5 data episodes or top 5 sort of data being an android episodes. What I meant this to say, and if I did do a top 5 episodes featuring data, it would be very different than this countdown here, because how I took this to mean is when the show took most advantage of the fact that Data was an android, combined with strong character moments for him that shows him as a sentient individual and not just an automaton. So it's those things combined. So it's not just the fact that he's an android, or it's not just a great character story for Data. It's the fact it's combining those things, showing how the show writers, because I know a lot of writers in Next Generation, actually, when I went through my rewatch of Next Generation, I noticed that a lot of writers didn't really know how to write for Data very well, and he came off as just like a flat sort of robot type thing. But I think he's definitely a more dynamic character when a writer did know how to write for him, and they made him more human, while at the same time showcasing his uniqueness as an android and using that for maximum effective storytelling effect. The fact that he was an android, but also showcasing that he is a sentient human being. So basically, this top 5 is basically the episodes I think that shows him at his most android and his most human simultaneously. But before I get into my top 5 best uses of data, I just want to throw out a few honorable mentions that didn't quite make my list, but I considered for my list. First honorable mention is Silicon Avatar, where Data consoles a woman who is dealing with the loss of her child. Next honorable mention is The Mind's Eye, where Data puts the pieces of the mystery together and it figures out that LaForge is a sleeper agent brainwashed by Romulans. Next honorable mention is Gambit Part 2, when Data takes command of the Enterprise and has to deal with the other crew, and you get to see his command style. And last honorable mention is Cause and Effect, where the solution has come through by using Data, who's able to send information into the next loop, and when they're stuck in a time loop, and Data is able to deduce from that information that a previous version of him sent how to get out of the time loop. So now let me get into my top 5 best or most intriguing uses of data in Star Trek Next Generation. We'll start with my number 5, which is the offspring. Now, the offspring, of course, is when Data creates a daughter. And it's not just that because I think when my criteria of showing Data at his most human and his most android, I think this is a good example of that, because it shows him wanting to procreate just like any human being would be. But he is an android, so it's not the same. And I love like the sort of Data and Picard butting heads over this, because Picard sees it as simply he's astonished, or he's creating like a new life, because Data's the only known as Soon type android in existence, well, other than Lore, I think, is out there somewhere at this point in stage. And but anyway, it's like a huge deal to Picard, but for Data, it's just like, I'm just procreating the way any other human being would. And so you see that sort of combination that it is pretty much the same, and it isn't. And then Picard, of course, goes through his own journey where he comes to defend Data's rights as a parent when Starfleet tries to take his daughter away from him. And then, of course, when his daughter dies, it is extremely tragic, and all Data doesn't show any emotion. You see that it affects him, and that he like saved Law's memory. And the moment where she says, "I love you, Father," right before she dies, one of the most tear-jerky moments in the entire show. And the fact they're able to pull those such strong emotional things off where Data doesn't in fact show any emotions was a feat indeed. So now, let me get into my number 4 most intriguing use of Data in Star Trek Next Generation, and that is the 6th season episode, The Quality of Life. Now, it's funny, a lot of these episodes on my list I feel like are some of my favorite episodes that I feel are underrated, that a lot of other people don't appreciate. I feel like I've always appreciated this episode more than a lot of people. This is the episode where Data, the Enterprise, encounters scientists who are just trying to create this particle fountain or whatever, but they just so happen to be using these artificial life forms for... to do the work and go into the mines where people couldn't go. And Data has a hypothesis that these artificial life forms are indeed sentient life and should be respected as sentient life. The creator, who didn't intend to create them as artificial life and sentient life forms, denies this, and they argue over this, and they have run experiments and do debate this on the Enterprise until Picard and LaForge get into an accident. A crisis happens on the particle fountain, it's falling apart, and Riker and the scientist comes up with a solution to save LaForge and Picard by sacrificing the exocomps, the artificial life forms, and just sending them in as lifeless drones to save the station where they'll die. And Data sees this as immoral and wrong because he still strongly believes that they're sentient, so he locks Riker and out of the system and preventing him from doing so, which I thought was an extremely powerful moment. It's a human moment for Data that he's willing to defy orders and risk his career and risk his friends' lives on a moral stance, having been a sentient life form and having that been well established at this stage, and his rights are just as strong as the rights of any flesh and blood organic life form. And for him to try to stand up for the exocomps in this manner, it was a very powerful moment. And of course, it speaks to Riker's character too, that he doesn't simply jump to screw you, Data, I'm going to court-martial you, whatever, that he tries to come up with a solution and see it from Data's point of view. It shows the kind of relationship that Data has built up with Riker, and they are able to come to a compromise where instead of blindly ordering the exocomps to go and sacrifice themselves to save LaForge and Picard, they ask them. They give them the orders, but give them the ability to deny the orders, and then the exocomps, in fact, come up with a better idea because they have more experience working with this fountain, and they come up with a better plan to save Picard and LaForge, although one of them does sacrifice themselves in order to pull off this plan. Not all of them, and they do it by choice. And I think that was an extremely great use for Data. It shows, even though he's an unfeeling android, it shows the sort of camaraderie he feels for other artificial life forms, and that he was willing to risk everything to protect those rights. Quite powerful in my opinion. So then we will get into my number 3 most intriguing use of Data in Star Trek Next Generation, which is Thine Own Self. Again, this is not an episode I really love, that I think a lot of people don't like as much. So this is when Data there's an accident that happens while Data's on a planet that has underdeveloped civilization, pre-warp civilization, and he loses his memories, and he just stumbles into the village not knowing who he is and not knowing that he's breaking the prime directive because he has no memory whatsoever. But what I like about this episode is I think this is the Next Generation tried several times to do like a bond between Data and a kid. They tried it in the episode Hero Worship. They tried it in Pen Pals, but neither of those examples worked, in my opinion, and it just came off as kind of contrived, and I didn't really buy Data's relation. Oh, and then it did it later on in Insurrections as well, which I also didn't think didn't work. But so they they try it, and I think this is the only time they got it right, where I actually really bought the relationship that Data had with this young girl, and that she was really sticking up for him, and that she come to appreciate and love him as a guardian type figure, because this young girl in question had lost her mother previously. And it also showcases how the town people, the more they found out about Data, that they didn't know he was an android. Of course, they have no concept of this, but they found out more that he was different, that they were fearful of him, and it eventually led to them like trying to hunt him down and kill him. While he was just trying to save them from the plague that he brought, because he brought radioactive fragments. Of course, losing his memory, he had no idea what radioactive meant, but he was piecing it together that it was the fragments that was causing people to be sick, whereas since the townspeople were so terrified of him being different, they assumed that he was purposely trying to poison and kill them. But he ended up saving them, but right before he did that, or right after he did that, he was killed or deactivated by someone throwing a pike in him. But as far as the young girl knew, that he was dead, and she mourned him as a figure that she would always remember, and a tragedy, someone who saved everyone's lives but was killed for it. But in fact, of course, Data was not dead, and eventually Riker and Crusher beamed down and beamed his body up, and LaForge was able to repair him. But this was unbeknownst to this young girl who would always see him, and it shows like the kind of Frankenstein-esque tragedy of it, how people are afraid of what they don't understand, and yet he was actually just a loving and kind person. Even though he's emotionless, he was able to mean so much to this young girl. I thought it was really powerful. Anyway, we'll get into my number 2 most intriguing use of Data, and that is Phantasms. Always one of my favorite episodes. I think this is one of the best horror-esque episodes. It's definitely the best, like, sort of creepy vibe feeling. It's the TNG episode that creeps me out the most. Maybe, I mean, other than Genesis, but Genesis is a bit silly. This isn't. I think this is better executed. And it's because it's about Data having these nightmares where these miners are like ripping him apart, and like everything's acting weird. It's very, I love the concept of Data dreaming was introduced in the previous season, but this is the episode that really takes full advantage of that Data has a subconscious, which is the whole episode is based on, because we come to learn later on that there's these microscopic interphasic organisms or whatever that are slowly eating at and killing the entire crew, which no one is aware of. But Data, apparently his subconscious picked this up, but not his conscious fact. So his subconscious is trying to make him aware of this during these dreams. That's why they come off as nightmares. And eventually Data like lashes out at Troy, who in this dream was like a cake, a cellular peptide cake with mint frosting. Anyway, that's pretty funny. So it uses that kind of symbolism to the way any human would, with it. Their subconscious is trying to tell them something, and I love how they do this for the android. That soon was trying to make Data very human, so that he would have created this subconscious, and having the dream program used his subconscious to try to make his conscious mind aware of trying to make sense of what the subconscious mind was perceiving and not actually understanding. And eventually they come to the conclusion that there are interphasic life forms, and he comes up, and Data and LaForge, of course, go on the holodeck and live one of his dreams, and they're able to deduce how to kill the organisms and save the crew. Plus, those organisms were like really freaked me out. Like when they shine that thing on Crusher, and they show this big thing on Riker's face and then one on Crusher's arm, that these organisms are like eating them from the inside, and they were all gonna like die in a few days. It's terrifying to me, and I love that they used Data. I think it was a very I think it fits this term the most. As I said, this isn't my favorite Data episode. Offspring would be much higher than this one, but it fits this my criteria for this countdown the most because it's an intriguing use of Data, because it uses the fact that he's an android, yet makes him come off as somewhat human for having these subconscious nightmares that totally save the crew from these vicious organisms. So I have to put that at number 2. But my number 1 most intriguing use of Data in Star Trek The Next Generation is going to be the 4th season episode, Clues. This has always been one of my favorite episodes of Next Generation. It's a mystery where the crew encounters a wormhole and they're unconscious for 30 seconds, but the more clues come up, the more things don't add up. And Data, of course, was conscious for this part, and so Data keeps denying all these clues and keeps insisting that they were only unconscious for 30 seconds when all the clues would seem to suggest they were actually conscious for 24 hours, that there's a missing day that they can't remember and that Data is lying about. And we come to find towards the end of the episode that is in fact the case, but that Data has a very good reason for lying about it. He was in fact ordered to do so by Picard because they encountered a xenophobic species that were going to kill them because they didn't want any knowledge of their existence to exist. And so they came up with a compromise where they would erase everyone's memory, but of course their technology had no effect on Data. So Data had to agree, and why Picard ordered him never to reveal what happened that day. Yet the crew figured it out itself. And it's just a very interesting use of Data because it shows, first of all, that he's the android, so he was unaffected by the aliens' influence, but how that kind of actually made things worse, because normally the aliens would just erase everyone, put them in a coma, whatever, and erase their memories, and so they think they were just having they were just in a wormhole for 30 seconds. But because Data was there, they interfered with the plans that actually made things worse, and where the aliens were going to kill them because of that, because Data was unaffected by their technology and he was aware, but they were able to come up with this compromise. But Data was doing his best to respect this compromise and was trying to come up with excuses why all these clues that were leading the crew to believe that they were awake for 24 hours were not accurate. But the more clues they came across, the more ridiculous Data was sounding. And it got to the point where Picard said Data outright that he gave Data direct order to tell them what happened, and he refused to, and so he could lose his career. Picard mentioned the possibility that they would possibly dismantle him to try to figure out what went wrong with him, but he's willing to face all these consequences in order to save his crew. But when the crew, the Enterprise, Picard takes the Enterprise back to the instance, the whole thing's going to happen over again, and so Data has to reveal what he knows to them because they figured it out anyway. It's the only way to save them life. And again, this is another effectively creepy episode. I love the way that the alien takes over Troy's body and goes, "The plan has failed." It's always been one of my favorite episodes for that. But then, of course, Data, in the end, they come up with another compromise, and Picard, convinces the aliens to let them try it again. This time, they eliminate all the clues, which does work, which I find it hard to believe because now there's several days missing. But whatever. It seems like they could have come up with a different story that would eliminate some of these clues. But whatever. Apparently, they did a good enough job of eliminating the clues, and so the crew now does go off thinking that they were just in a wormhole for 30 seconds, and Data lives. And I love the musical cues this episode used and how they zoom in on Data, and they had this nice musical cue. So one of the best uses of music in Star Trek, in my opinion, this whole episode. And they use this musical cue to show that Data has this knowledge, that he will always know what happened, but no one else will, and he will take this knowledge to his grave because his crew's life depends on it. Very powerful So that, I would have to say, is the most intriguing use of data in Star Trek Next Generation. So anyway, that is it for my top 5 most intriguing uses of data in the Next Generation. I want to thank Chase very much for suggesting this video and for supporting me on Patreon. Of course, everyone who supports me on Patreon, Norman Buckwald, Brendan Howells, and everyone else who supports me. Very much appreciated. And if you would like to support me on Patreon, there is a link in the description below. You can click on the link, and even $1 or more will get you access to early releases of videos, and polls for Star Trek episodes that I review that you get 2 months in advance before anyone else. And also, if you donate $5 or more, or $5 or more, you get pre-releases for all the videos that I create, and $10 or more will allow you to suggest recommend content for me to do, which I will do on my channel. So yes, but if you're unable to support me on Patreon, that's good too. I understand. You can support me by leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. Also very much appreciated. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this. Be sure to check out my channel as I do many more Star Trek videos at the moment, covering Star Trek Discovery, and also all sorts of Star Trek shows and other shows like Star Wars: The Clone Wars, The Expanse, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.